Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is not a gameplay, this is just the deck tech for Meren of Clan Nel Toth. If you haven't seen yet, I just posted two new videos, both using the Meren deck. One has 3 games and one has 2 games respectively. I believe I have Contamination and the MTGO promo Bayou art as the thumbnails for them. One of the things I just like to do is always have some MTG art as a thumbnail for my decks. It gets a little trite having the commanders as thumbnails for every deck. I do include the names of commanders in the hidden tags, so that way if you search the name of a commander, it will show up in the search results, as well as, with the exception of the last 2 videos, having the name of the commander in the title of the video. I'll most likely be adding Meren of Clan Nel Toth to the title of those videos in about a week, once most of my subscribers have gotten to see them and the surprise is gone. Those will be updated soon enough, and I'll update the descriptions as soon as I type up this list and tapped out as well. Definitely enjoy playing Meren. Alright, without further ado, let's get into the deck tech. As you can see, I'm in my collection here. And some other stuff that I've been tinkering with, Mina and Den for multiplayer. Now that I have the Cradle, which you absolutely need in Mina and Den, in my opinion, to make it somewhat viable for multiplayer. Now that I picked that up in one of my recent buys, I decided to build them, which was relatively inexpensive, thankfully. One of the cards that I'm still missing on Moto is a Crucible, unfortunately, so we'll be picking that up soon enough, hopefully. Alright, let's get into this. So the deck only plays 12 basics. It is 3 swamps and 9 forests. And despite being very black heavy, there's a couple double black spells. 6, I think, off the top of my head. Bloodghast, Lily, Skinrunner, Mindslicer, Hypnotist, and Sidisi, I believe, are all of the double black spells in the deck. I do play a wealth of mana on turn 1. So I have Birds of Paradise, Carped of Flowers, Elves of Deep Shadow, Elvish Mystic, Fentorn Elves, Llanowar Elves, Deathrite Shaman, and Skullclamp. But Skullclamp does not require the green source. And Green Sun Zenith. I knew I was missing one, because Green Sun Zenith ramps by getting the Dryad Arbor. So a lot of green that is sort of necessary on turn 1. Basically as soon as the game starts, you want to be having green mana in play with this deck. Furthermore, there's even more green on turn 2. Bloom Tender, Sakura Tribe Elder, Sylvan Caryatid, and Sylvan Scrying, and Satyr Wayfinder pseudo ramps. Guarantees a land drop, or almost guarantees a land drop. And then at 3, there's Nissa, Vastwood Seer, Wood Elves. And that's it for the 3-drop ramps. Then Oracle on 4, and Freyalise on 5 as a double green, are all ramp spells in this deck that require green mana. Most importantly, it's on turn 1 though, so you got to play a wide supply of forests. The rest of the mana base is spread evenly over some of the best lands I can be playing in this format. So Dryad Arbor for the interaction with Green Sun Zenith turn 1, and I'll talk about that in a sec. I'm going to pull those 2 forward. Ancient Tomb, just good, solid value, banned in dual commander for a reason, but because MTGO uses traditional Sheldon Menery quality ban lists, I get to play broken things like Ancient Tomb, Soul Ring, Mana Crypt. Pardon that, sorry about that. Then I have Bayou, one of the newer pickups. Gotta play the dual land. I have every fetch required for this deck. Bloodstained Mire. Let's see if I can pull them out. Marsh Flats, Misty Rainforest, Polluted Delta, Verdant Catacombs, Windswept Heath, Wooded Foothills. I think that's all of them. I play every fetch in this deck. And I have Bayou and Overgrown Tomb down here to be able to fetch with them. I know I'm playing the ugly art Overgrown Tomb, but it's like $3 difference on Moto when I picked up the Overgrown Tomb. I'm not going to pay that much difference. Alright, some Rainbow lands. City of Brass, Command Tower, Mana Confluence. Even though 1v1 is now a 30 life format, and I'll talk about that at the end of this video, the 30 life change, I just have to have the mana. City of Brass and Mana Confluence, and Llanowar Waste, I guess, is effectively City of Brass. Actually, slightly better than both of them. but because you can tap it for generic or colorless mana instead for generic costs, and it doesn't always hurt you. But this deck is so color greedy, and I want to play so many good utility lands like Ancient Tomb, Phyrexian Tower, Strip Mine, Tectonic Edge, Volvash Stronghold, that I have to make sure that I can get my mana fixing where I need it. Furthermore, this build, because it is traditional, gets to use Soul Ring Mana Crypt, so I definitely need to be capitalizing on Rainbow Mana, even if it costs me life every time I use it. I do play Scavenging Ooze as a way to regain some of that life loss by eating my own yard, so I'm not terribly hurt by it. Alright, on to some more stuff. Some utility lands. I have Bojuka Bog, I have Phyrexian Tower, I have Volvash Stronghold. Urborg basically turns all of my lands into swamps, which is why I can also skimp a little bit on the swamp count. Tectonic Edge, Strip Mine. I don't own the Wasteland on MTGO yet. Conveniently, Strip Mine's banned in Dual Commander, but not in Traditional, so might as well just play the Strip Mine. Tectonic Edge will turn into a Wasteland. This is a carryover from the Dual Commander list, but I'm not paying the 55, I believe, or that Wasteland currently is, just for Wasteland. I have no use for it outside of EDH, which is the only format that I play on MTGO. Sorry. Only format besides Momir Basic and Pauper that I play on MTGO. Neither of which I can use Wasteland in. So, that's all fetches. Twilight Mire, which I picked up with credit from MTGO traders. When you buy cards from MTGO traders right now, there is a discount coupon. But if you do automatic delivery and the bot delivers it to you, it will add, if you forget, quote, end quote, to apply the coupon, it will just give you 5% credit into your MTGO Traders account. So that's what I've been doing consistently, building up a little bit of credit with the bots. Every time I make a buy, instead of using the discount, I just get a little bit back to pick up additional things. So I picked up a Twilight Mire with some of that credit. It's a pretty cool interaction with MTGO Traders and some of their bots. I definitely like them as a source. Nate uses a couple others that I can't think of offhand right now. He might comment down below, or if I talk to him, maybe I'll add them in the description as well. Alright, so Woodland Cemetery, just another rainbow land, almost always untapped because of all of these beautiful fetch lands. God, it's just so pretty having them. And then finally, Blooming Marsh. The mana is important early, later in the game, tapped is okay. If you notice, the curve tops out at 5. And this is honestly a 2-drop, so the drawback of having this come into play tapped is very, very low, unless I'm trying to cast 3 spells or so in a turn, which this deck doesn't really need to do. Finally, we have Gaia's Cradle as the final utility, quote-unquote, land in the deck, and it is one of the 3 most powerful. It is the second most powerful card in this deck. The first being Phyrexian Tower. Let me drop these non-basics back over here. Alright, now let me talk about Phyrexian Tower for a sec. Phyrexian Tower is part of the most degenerate opening that Meren of Clan Nel Toth has, and it's usually something like this. If I have these 3 cards, not Dryad Arbor, these 3 cards in my opening hand, I have a turn 2 Meren of Clan Nel Toth with my best fetch land in the graveyard, and I'm going to untap on turn 3 with potentially 4 to 5 mana, with Meren and the ability to immediately gain 1 experience counter that turn. And the way that it works is you fetch out your Bayou, Green Sun Zenith, putting it back in the deck for the Dryad Arbor, pass the turn. Then on your next turn, this is in the graveyard, conveniently, hopefully, you have a follow-up play on turn 3. But you tap Dryad Arbor for green mana, tap and sacrifice it to Phyrexian Tower for black, tap Bayou for anything, cast Meren of Clan Nel Toth, pass turn at 0 experience, return Dryad Arbor from your graveyard to play. Then in the following turn, you have green from Arbor, 2 from Tower, 1 from Bayou, 1 from a land drop, 5 mana. Any follow-up play will almost always really put you in a driver's seat position for the entirety of the game. Also, if you don't have to sacrifice Dryad Arbor, you can play another creature, sacrifice that creature for additional value. Something like Mesmeric Fiend. Sacrifice Mesmeric Fiend in response to the trigger, and you get to permanently exile a card from your opponent's hands. Lots of very cool interactions in this deck. Let me resort this. Alright. Alright, so now we've done all of the lands. On to the real spells. Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Skull Clamp. Degenerate card, degenerate card, degenerate card. If you couldn't tell in one of the videos that I very much can abuse Skull Clamp in this deck, more than most other decks can, and it gets out of hand very, very quickly. Alright, 1 mana, Duress, Entomb, Abandoned Dual Commander, Legal Here. Imperial Seal, same thing. Reanimate, Vampiric Tutor, same as Imperial Seal, a little bit better. Both are relatively cheap on MTGO, so if you play black, pick them up. They may be going up with more people getting into EDH on MTGO, especially in 1v1. Keep in mind, we might be getting leagues on Amonkhet. Talk about that more later also. Alright, talked about all the mana ramp. The other things that I have at 1 are Caustic Caterpillar and Nature's Claim. And Nature's Claim isn't in the actual list for Dual Commander, but it is a hedge against the fact that every deck has these 2 cards in it. You gotta have an answer to turn 1 Mana Crypt, Soul Ring. I have multiple answers in the form of Caustic Caterpillar, Nature's Claim, Crow's Grip, Reclamation Sage. Do I have anything at 2? Phyrexian Revoker can turn them off. So I have answers up and down the board, ideally. Freyalise at the top end, Acidic Slime at the top end. Granted, those don't come down there. Oh, I have Putrefy. I knew I had one more. Deed is very good against them. All right, so that turns out the 1-drops. One of the things that could be included here specifically for 1v1 is Thoughtseize. I just don't have one on MTGO for some reason. I might pick one up in the next buy. Alright, 2-drops. Animate Dead, good value card. It's also a hedge against Reanimator-style decks that you can animate dead your opponent's creature, hopefully in response before they can. Bitter Blossom, it is part of a lock I will talk about later. Brain Maggot and Mesmeric Fiend, these are hand disruption. Even though they will get the opponent will get the card back, assuming you are playing them fairly at some point. This type of tempo is usually good enough, especially if you can land them on turn 2. Chains of Mephistopheles. The way this card works is if an opponent draws a card other than the card they draw, first they have to discard a card. This is mandatory. They must discard a card and then they must draw the card. It is a mandatory rummage if you would draw. You do not get to choose whether or not to discard a card and mill 1 card instead. You must discard. So when your opponent is at a single card in hand and they draw a card outside of their draw step, they must discard what is in their hand. If they cannot discard a card, meaning they're hellbent, they mill a card and skip the draw. So once you get an opponent to a hellbent situation with effects like Sadistic Hypnotist or Mind Slicer, which I'll talk about later, Chains is the final nail in the coffin. They cannot draw out of that situation. And that is why you play Chains of Mephistopheles, which is surprisingly cheap on MTGO. If you own one in paper, I congratulate you. I mean, I have a Twister in paper, and I don't have Chains for some reason. Maybe I'll have to transmute that Twister into something else. Dark Confidant, Bob Marr himself. And you got to play the Bob Marr art. Very good card. It is better than Phyrexian Arena. It comes back with Meren. It blocks, it attacks, it does damage. And if you notice, my curve is obscenely low because of Dark Confidant. I want to take as minimal damage as possible. And I know 30 life isn't a lot. It's still a lot of life for Bob to be hurting me. I do not. You play Bob in Modern when you're at 20 life and you're taking fetch shock damage. You can play Bob at a 30 life format in EDH. You just can't play 6-drops and 7-drops. Demonic Tutor, the best, the original. Bloodghast, a very good value. Great with Skull Clamp, great with fetch lands. Just generically good effects for Meren. It is a great source of experience counters. Bloom Tender, evolutionary Bloom Tender I talked about with the mana. Basically just produces 2. Sylvan Caryatid, sorry, that's library. Sylvan Caryatid is hexproof, which is why it gets a nod in the build. It also has 3 toughness, which is actually rather bulky, and it stops some of the early aggro very well. It's also unable to be removed, so if they were trying to put me off, if my opponent was trying to put me off of colored mana in some way, but I managed to stick this, their removal's dead against it, and I've locked myself into a way of having an access to both colors. Or either color, I guess. Fauna Shaman, it is Demonic Tutor in this deck. I just noticed I don't have Survival of the Fittest in here, which I should. I'll have to add that in my next update. Probably cut... What is the cut? Maybe Buried Alive. I know, it's crazy, right? But power of survival, man. Okay. Scavenging Ooze, fantastic card. Satyr Wayfinder, fantastic card. Fills the grave for Meren, finds me lands. Steve, amazing synergy with Meren of Clan Nel Toth, ramps me out, produces good value. Mayor of Averbrook, in a control matchup, this is the control breaker, just like Bitter Blossom. These cards, a control deck cannot allow you to have. Well, Mayor of Averbrook once it flips. It is an endless source of card advantage that a control deck cannot come back from. They must be answered. Granted, Mayor of Averbrook is slightly more fragile as a creature, but I am playing a Meren deck. Creatures do have a habit of coming back when you're playing Meren as your commander. Alright, Sylvan Caryatid. Sylvan Library, very, very, very good green card draw at 2 mana. Got to be a little bit more judicious with your life total now that you're down to 30 life instead of 40. You can't mindlessly take 3 turns in a row. Just 2 turns in a row. Don't worry, guys. It's still very, very good. Still very powerful. Sylvan Scrying, I have incredibly potent lands in this deck, and I want to be able to use those lands as often as possible. It's the same reason I'm playing Crop Rotation, which I skipped earlier. My apologies. Both of these are almost always the targets for these 2 spells. I'm getting one of these 3 lands, with the exception of Volrath's Stronghold in late game, because Volrath's Stronghold allows me to get 2 creatures per turn. 1 for my draw step, 1 for Meren. Alright. Oop. Sort. Mana cost. There we go. Alright. So I'm scrying Phyrexian Revoker. It just has good synergy with a lot of the deck. It shuts off things that you need to shut off, turns off swords, turns off opposing Mana Crypt Sol Rings, Skull Clamps. Anything that your opponent's doing that is generally degenerate, Revoker deals with. And Revoker can be reset easily with the commander as well. Buried Alive is basically triple Demonic Tutor in this deck. Contamination, part of a lock. Once you have Bitter Blossom in play, or Mayor of Averbrook flipped, there's an endless stream of creatures to feed to Contamination and prevent your players from producing more than just a single black mana per land. Ideally, Meren will also fuel Contamination locks. And once you get this in play, your most important thing to have in play is a source of green mana. That is Birds of Paradise, Carpet of Flowers, Elvish Mystic, Finhorn Elves, Llanowar Elves, Bloom Tender, Sylvan Caryatid. You need one of those sources, or Deathrite Shaman if you have a good supply of lands, to be able to produce green mana every turn. That's why Freyalise also gets an inclusion in this deck now, is because she produces 1/1 greens that tap for green mana. She produces Llanowar Elves. So she keeps you safe underneath Contamination Lock as well, and fuels it potentially if you need to. Alright, so how's that Contamination? Fleshbag Marauder, it's incredible value with Meren. I know I'm playing the bad art, this is the one that I have on MTGO. I think it was part of the initial collection when I got online. Toxic Deluge, the best, Black Wrath, Yawgmoth's Will, not a great card, right? This card can't possibly, it exiles cards. Why would you ever want to do that? Yawgmoth's Will is very typically not an I win card in this deck. That turn, I should say. It will win you the game. It just doesn't appear so because you don't win the turn that Yawgmoth's Will resolves. It just puts you in such an untenable position that your opponent will almost never be able to come back from it. This is the inclusion over Recurring Nightmare. I think my opponents would rather I actually have Recurring Nightmare than Yawgmoth's Will in this deck. At least that requires a creature. Will just requires me to have 3 mana. Liliana, Heretical Healer, and Defiant Necromancer. This is one of the few decks that gets to play both Flipwalkers that I think are very good for EDH. JVP is obviously very good, but he needs to be at the helm of decks to be most efficient. Both of these are fantastic creatures in their own rights. 2/3 lifelink and a 2/2 that gets me a land. And Liliana flips into a devastating Planeswalker. I don't have Liliana of the Veil on MTGO yet. Hopefully Modern Masters 3 drops her price a little bit. I think if she dips beneath 30, I'll pick her up. 30 US, that is. Reclamation Sage, talked about it. Wood Elves, Ramp. Eternal Witness, it's a graveyard deck. Eternal Witness is a good green magic card that gets you back things. It's regrowth, but it's on a creature from Meren. Do I really need to explain Eternal Witness? Pernicious Deed, Repeatable Wrath with something like Eternal Witness. Bring back Meren. Wrath 3, kill Eternal Witness. Bring back Eternal Witness with Meren. Bring back Deed. You see where this loop goes? Alright. Putrefy, good solid removal that's flexible. Tangle Wire, amazing lockdown card. I do not care if I tap down with Meren because I'm going to get value whether she's tapped or not. My opponent not casting spells and me not casting spells, Meren breaks that parity rather efficiently. Trinisphere, same sort of idea of Tangle Wire. If you land it early, turn 1 Crypt. If you go turn 1 and you land Crypt, Ring, and Trinisphere is on your board by the end of your turn 2, I don't think you're going to be losing that game against most opponents that have competitive builds. All right, into the 4-drops. Oracle of Moldiah, it is green's Jace the Mind Sculptor. It draws so many cards over the course of the game, plenty of shuffle effects, especially with Birthing Pod in its deck, that you can almost always draw 2 cards off this, putting lands into play. It's also very good with these utility lands that you want to have additional effects on, like saving the tower to have the instant speed, unrespondable sacrifice, because your opponent can't respond to it because it produces mana. It's a mana ability. It does not use the stack. So when you want to keep that up, Oracle helps you hit your land drop still. Mind Slicer, which I'll talk about in a sec. Let me move this crypt over. So this can be my talk about column. Birthing Pod. Look at this pod chain. There's good stuff at every point of this curve. There's hate at every point of this curve. There's Skin Render for creature removal, Oracle for draw, Mind Slicer for hand disruption. One of each of the 3 points that this deck wants to do. Board disruption, hand disruption, draw power. Birthing Pod gets them at 4. It is one of the lighter points on this particular build, so I've thought about including one more thing at 4-drop, potentially the Tree Folk that comes in with a -1/-1 counter. So that way I have artifact or enchantment destruction at 4 as well. So that way I can pod from any point of my chain and get a naturalize effect. All right, Shriek Maw actually costs 2 mana. It is terror on a stick, and it's very good with Meren because you get the synergy of creature dying, bringing back a creature repeatedly. Sadistic Hypnotist wins games by itself. I've talked about this with my Sidisi Brood Tyrant deck. Sadistic Hypnotist, unchecked for a single turn, will take over the entire game. If I'm in an even slightly advantageous board position, Hypnotist will win the game. I don't think Hypnotist is ever that terrible of a card to draw when you're at parity and you're in a top decking war. They got 2 or 3 cards, you have 2 or 3 cards, and you top deck Hypnotist, you're most likely going to be winning that game if you can cast this and get its ability off. Sidisi Undead Vizier, it has good synergy with Meren, and it's nice to be able to pod the Mind Slicer, which will trigger after you pod, before you search for your thing, discarding hands, and then you pod into a Demonic Tutor, 2 Demonic Tutor for your Yogg-Will, Deed, Ewit, Tower, any number of effects, but being able to pod into Demonic Tutor is very good. And then being able to use Meren to regrow Demonic Tutor every turn is very good. Acidic Slime, good removal, kills lands. Don't really need to talk about it anymore. Freyalise, Slanderous Fury, removal at the -2, a way out from underneath my own contamination at our +2. I never evaluate a Planeswalker on their ultimate, and neither should you if you want to play competitive EDH and be able to evaluate cards on their abilities in general, especially Planeswalkers, is don't never play a Planeswalker just because of their ultimate. All of their abilities should be relevant to your game plan, and if they're not, that Planeswalker might not be as synergistic with your deck as you think. Jace the Mind Sculptor is not a good Planeswalker because he can exile your opponent's deck. That's a side effect of him being a good Planeswalker. He is good because he draws an extra card every turn, he sculpts your hand, he Fate Seals opponents. Those are why he bounces creatures. Those are the reasons he is a good Planeswalker. The fact that if he had no ultimate ability on him, he would still be very widely played, especially in Eternal formats. Finally, Green Sun Zenith rounds out the package. Look at some of the green creatures I got in here. I have removal at 1. I have no removal at 2, which I should look into. This should be survival. Yeah, I should just cut this for survival. What am I talking about? I'll do that right now. I do have a survival in my collection, I know. I don't know how I missed that while I was building this deck. No. Primals, Rift Sweeper, Survival. There we go. Alright, that's fixed. Much better card. Even though the other's a sack outlet, Survival is a tutor. Come on, guys. Alright. So, what was it? Oh, I was talking about Green Sun Zenith. I don't know what I just did. Whatever. Alright. Green Sun Zenith, I have answers up and down my curve for a variety of situations. I have Fauna Shaman, Bloom Tender if I need mana. Bloom Tender tends to be the best mana target when you have Greenstone Zenith for any value, but you need to get mana. Bloom Tender is the best because it produces 2. Deathrite's the most flexible if you need Grave Hate. Caryatid's the most resilient. Birds is the least threatening of the good sources, so to speak. Deathrite's a little bit more threatening because of Grave Hate. Nissa is a very good target as well because she gets you a land drop if you need a land drop. She also flips and creates a Phyrexian Arena effect that doesn't cost life later. Oracle is a great land source if you have a fetch land in play that you haven't cracked yet. Acidic Slime for removal. There's just good stuff everywhere. So I did it once in one of my videos, and I wanted to talk about it. The interaction between Mind Slicer, Phyrexian Tower, and Meren of Clan Nel Toth is not to be underestimated. Because Phyrexian Tower is a mana ability, sacrifice a creature, add black to your mana pool, it cannot be responded to when you sacrifice a creature to it. The creature is dead, and any creature that triggers on death, that trigger is being placed onto the stack no matter what. Your opponents can then respond to the trigger, but you already have black in your pool, and there's nothing that they can't kill Meren in response to the tower trigger, so I don't get value. They can't try to kill Mind Slicer, or they basically they need to have Stifle to stop the Mind Slicer trigger, but you can't kill. And this can be responded. Most importantly, this can be used in response to split-second things. So if my opponent uses something like, say, what's the card? Sudden Spoiling to turn all of my creatures into 0/1s with no abilities, I can respond to Sudden Spoiling with Phyrexian Tower. I knew there was a situation where sudden Death doesn't do it. But Sudden Spoiling would make Mind Slicer have no abilities, meaning that if he died, nothing would happen. I can respond to Sudden Spoiling with Mind Slicer, with Phyrexian Tower Mind Slicer, is because it is a mana ability. It does not use the stack, therefore you can put it on the stack, or you can activate it in response to something like a Crozang Grip or Sudden Spoiling effect that normally prevents that from happening. So that's why Phyrexian Tower is one of the absolute best sacrifice outlets in a black deck. I think that could, I don't know. So Mind Slicer is well and truly earned his spot in the builds of Meren, and you know me, I gotta play the white border Mind Slicer for you guys. I know how much you all love my John Avon 7th edition forests and swamps. Oh no, my swamps aren't John Avon. I don't think I like the John Avon art as much. Tony Scuzadula. I'm butchering that. I'm gonna stop before I embarrass myself anymore. Alright, well, if you like the deck, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video. I should have some more games with Meren soon. I'm hoping to catch Nate or Brian online soon and be able to run this against them. I'd love to play Brian's Nin deck with this deck, especially at the 30 life. And what really motivated me to finish this build was the change that happened to our format. The 30 life and the impending leagues made me really want to put together a consistent competitive deck that I have good experience with, and furthermore isn't terribly intensive as far as combo goes for MTGO. I would love to play Tazri in upcoming EDH leagues. The issue with Tazri is it is so incredibly click intensive to do even the food chain loop and kill someone from 40 life with food chain and infinite mana. It is very, very difficult to go through that process. And you've seen me you do infinite mana combos with Yisan before. And I sort of wanted to move away from that just because of how difficult it is on MTGO. I can't make shortcuts for this program. Or there's no way with this program to shortcut, I should say. Those types of combos and demonstrating a loop doesn't exist on MTGO. You just have to keep going through it. Now, kind opponents will understand, no, he's got the game. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to scoop. And I am sometimes that kind of opponent. If I think I'm going to be able to come back from it or disrupt it somehow, I'm not going to scoop to a combo like that, but in other situations I will. But Tazri cannot, Food Chain Tazri cannot exist in the same way that she does in paper, cannot exist online in the same way that she does on paper. It is too click intensive of a combo, even if you're just casting and replay and exiling. I think it's a 3-click to produce 1 mana, but that's 3 clicks for 1 mana, and you need 2 two additional mana per cycle for the commander, and it goes up way too quickly, the amount of times that you have to click, because that means it's an additional 6 clicks compounded by the number of times you need to cast Tazri, or it's the number of times you need to cast Tazri plus equals to X, where X is their life total, plus 1 for their first tutor, and the number of clicks is twofold that. There, do some math for you. So an opponent at 40 life. I'm not going to do that on the fly like that. That is a hell of a lot of clicks, and it takes a hell of a lot of time. All right, so my thoughts on the format. I think 30 life is a very good change. If you are fans of Brian or Nate in particular, Nate is a big fan of the card Necropotence. He's a control player at heart, and Necropotence is just everything that a control player loves. It's draw, it's cheap, it's unrespondable in the sense that it resolves and it's already done its damage. It's one-sided. It's a very good Magic card. And, I mean, there's arguments to be including it in Meren. It's just that triple black is actually relatively hard to hit in this deck, and the deck doesn't need Necropotence. The value comes from the graveyard, and if I have to discard cards, I don't want them going to exile. I want them in my yard. So this deck, I don't think, needs Necro. But so 30 life does help with this, the Sylvan Library, Necropotence, ad nauseum decks, and it makes those decks slightly harder to use. Speaking as I am from playing Dual Commander with Meren and being familiar with that format, that is the French format, not Leviathan, I do not think 30 life is going to make aggro decks any more prevalent in the format. It's going to make Aloro a lot better because all of a sudden he's still very... the 2 life is a significantly greater portion of your starting life total than it was before. I mean, think about it. Everyone now has 30 life, and you get to start the game with 40, instead of everyone has 40 life, and you get to start the game with 50. So instead of a 25% bonus, or you have 125% of your opponent's life starting the game effectively, you now have 135% of your opponent's starting life total. It's a pretty big difference, especially in a format where more people are going to be playing creatures and turning them sideways. I think the change is good overall. It's going to push tempo decks a little bit more into the meta. I do not think any tempo deck is going to become tier 1. It might push a Storm build a little bit higher in the tier that uses Tendrils as a kill. I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as good as the traditional Storm, which is Doomsday, or which is Storm on the side of I'm going to bounce all of your permanents with, what's the card? Temporal Fissure, I believe, is the Storm card. It was banned in Pauper for because it was so good. So Temporal Fissure, I think, is still one of the better Storm cards, along with Mind's Desire, usually trying to get insane value off giant spells. But it might push the Tendrils of Agony builds a little bit higher, but I don't think anywhere to competitive levels. We're definitely going to see more creature decks, especially in leagues. We're going to see more red decks. Perforos is getting a huge boost in 1v1. That said, you're playing mono red, so, I mean, there's your drawback right there. Linvala might get a little bit of a boon, and she is definitely a potent commander. It's also going to make both of the Thalia decks much better. And I think the Thalias are some of the best mono-white commanders. They come down early, they have a very good disruption package, they are very efficient hate bearers commanders. Both of them are good, honestly, and me making my mana base much better only makes a 3-mana Thalia deck hurt me that much more. So we're going to have some interesting adjustments in the meta, and I think that the alternate ban list that Wizards teased, if you're not familiar, there's a post going around Reddit of a picture from MTGO's or Magic's Tumblr, I believe, a Wizards Tumblr post, that an alternate ban list will be introduced, and I personally hope this is the first in a series of steps to move Sheldon and the Rules Committee off of overarching control of the format. I find it hard to believe that Wizards sat down with them and said, "Oh, all right, we're going to officially support your format, but we don't ever want to have any control over what gets banned and what stays legal." And from my understanding, they have recommended cards to the RC and Sheldon in the past to be looked at, quote unquote, and the rules committee didn't even look at the cards, from my understanding. I have that from a good source on the other side of the Iron Curtain, so to speak. But we'll have to see what happens with this new ban list. Personally, the changes that I would like to see as a competitive player is seeing these 3 cards leave the format, along with Mana Vault and Grim Monolith. I do not think they are healthy, especially in a format that Wizards wants to support leagues in with buy-ins. The disproportionate number of games that people will lose in their leagues to your opponent opening turn 1 Mana Crypt Sol Ring or even Ancient Tomb is going to be rather high. Think about this. I have 2 cards in my 100-card deck. There is a 1% chance or a 7% chance of drawing either of them. But because it is 2 cards out of 100, it's 1 card out of 50. That's a 7% out of 50. I think it's like 15 or almost 20% with 1 mulligan to be able to have Mana Crypt or Sol Ring in my opening hand, barring everything else. But to have one of those 2 cards in my opening hand is somewhere like 1/5 of games, which is an inordinate amount of number. The fact that I can just win 1/5, maybe a 1/6 of games with keepable hands, I guess, just because of a facet of the format, is very unhealthy for anything that Wizards plans to incorporate buy-ins and prize support. They do not make a healthy 1v1 meta. They are wildly unbalanced for the game that someone opens it and someone doesn't. So I personally would like to see these 3 cards in particular go. You say Ancient Tomb's not broken. Look at some of my games. You can also go to the Dual Commander forums and read why Ancient Tomb was banned in that format as well. It is still just as powerful as some of these cards, and it is even more difficult to remove because it is a land. All right, I know it's a long video. I apologize, guys, but I wanted to put my thoughts out for the format. I made a long, ranty, slightly intoxicated rant post on Reddit in the Magic trading card game at Magic TCG subreddit, I believe. Someone sent me the link to the post. I started commenting, realized I should just make a self-post instead. It was going to be too long anyway. So I made a self-post, and it was rather ranty. It was about 7 steps that I detailed about how Wizards will, in my opinion, eventually take over the commander list. And it's just going to be how it changes. It's going to be a slow and steady progress that Wizards can honestly stop at any point. But think about it this way. If Wizards starts offering prize support for 1v1, that incentivizes 1v1 build over multiplayer builds, meaning that they're building for Wizards ban list, not the RC ban list. Furthermore, the RC doesn't have any sway in stores besides player voices. Stores, everyone plays the Wizards list because that's what people play on Moto. That's what people have been building decks for. That's what people have been winning prizes for. So if there's one card that is unbanned from when Wizards makes their list from the RC's list, and people want to play that card, maybe Primeval Titan, maybe, please Primeval Titan, I would play it here. I'll cut my Sol Ring and Mana Crypt and Ancient Tomb if I can put Primeval Titan in this deck. Look at my utility lands, guys. But if people want to be able to play that card in EDH, there's going to be pressure on stores to support Wizards ban list instead of the RC ban list. And should that happen, when player bases start asking stores to follow the Wizards list instead of the RC list, I think that will be the nail in the coffin of the rules committee controlling the format. And they've never said that it's a hard and fast ban list. By all means, talk with your local metas. What cards should be banned? What cards shouldn't be banned? Personally, I like a mix of both ban lists. I think Primetime, Sylvan Prime should be legal. Emrakul is a fine Magic card. If you cast something for 15 mana or cheat a 15 mana thing into play, fine, you got it. I'll scoop, play the next one. But you got 15 mana. Honestly, you should be able to play Gristlebrand as a commander. These 2 cards make Gristlebrand broken. When you can put Gristlebrand into play on turn 3 because of these cards, yeah, he's very good. But when you got to be working hard and he's coming down turn 5 because of the quad black requirement, it's a little bit more fair, honestly, and less life total starting, less cards you can draw. All right, that's my thoughts. I know I ranted a little bit in this video, but this is really one of my favorite decks, and I've put a lot of love and heart into playing Meren and building Meren. I've tuned her for about a year. I have an old post on MTGS Salvation about the deck list before Necrotic Ooze got banned in Dual Commander, but I definitely enjoy playing this one. All right, I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video.